Hey there, everyone. Jason with Edge Rods here, and I'm with Gary Loomis. And we're going to be doing a video once every couple of weeks and have Gary tell you a story about the industry way back when for all you guys who are just now getting into fishing. And today I'm going to have Gary tell a story about his first summer and the first time he started building fishing rods for steelhead fishermen. So here's Gary Loomis.
I got married April 14th, and then found summer run steelhead on the Kalama River on the 28th of May. And I just had my 53rd wedding anniversary, so I've got the same woman. So you young kids that are out fishing and this type of stuff, if you pick the right woman, she'll stick with you. Anyway, all my life was all I did is fish. When I was a kid, Mom would give me a licking, and it didn't help a whole lot. But if she tried to keep me from going fishing, then I straightened up and started flying right. But anyway, I went in the Navy in 1960 and got out in 1964, and then here came the first summer runs in the Kalama River. Well, the Kalama River never had a run of summer runs in it prior to that time. It was their first return. So nobody knew much about them. I mean, the guy came to me and he says, there's fresh fish in the Kalama River. And I says, no, they're downriver fish that are brightening back up. They winter fish. No, no, no. He says, I think they're bright. They're fat and sassy and this type of stuff. So being a good fisherman, not ever going to pass up a good run of fish, I went down to check it out. Well, the first night with my old steelhead rod that I had before I went in the Navy, I caught 6 summer run steelhead. Well, I've never been on anything before, but nothing could be more addictive than 6 summer run steelhead in one evening. And so I started fishing every night. I'd leave work. I worked as a journeyman machinist. I worked at Sherman's Machine Shop in Woodland. I'd leave at 4:30. I'd be on the river at 11 minutes to 5, and I'd fish until dark. Well, in the latter part of May and the 1st of June, you're getting a lot of runoff from the mountain from snow melt, and the water is just about like winter water. It's fairly high, it's murky, and I had a 8.5 foot Fenwick steelhead rod and 12 or 15 pound test line and a big hunk of lead this big and a big bait of eggs, and it worked okay. But by the time that June came up, middle of June and July, the winter water was clearing up, and I could see more fish in the river coming up, but I was getting less bites. It just started tapering off. So I started thinking maybe it had something to do with the big diameter line that I had. So I went from 15 to 12 to 10. I got down to 8 pound test, and I was getting a lot more bites, but these fish were so wild. I mean, they'd jump out of the air and back and forth and snap you off in midair, especially if you had your sinker tied tight to your line. This is when we started to have tubular pencil lead that we could press on just enough for the drift, but if the fish shook really hard and that lead came tight to the fish's mouth, instead of snapping off your leader, it'd throw the sinker off. And so there was a lot of changes during that time to hooking and catching these. But I found out really, really fast in those days something you want to remember. You take 10 pound test, you wrap it around your hands, you hold your hands out like that, and I doubt that there's any of you that's going to be able to break it. But if you do this, you can break it easy. So it's not the pull that was breaking off these fish, it was the shock. And so what I figured is what I needed was a shock absorber. So I went down to the store and I bought me a 9 foot, 6 weight fly rod. And I went back, and being a machinist, I drilled a hole in the butt of it. I extended the handle, spinning handle. I turned around with in those days you had a Mitchell spinning reel or a Mitchell spinning reel. That was the best. Drag didn't work at all, so you had to back it off and use your finger for your drag system. But anyway, I had to take a file and file the foot of the reel down so it would go into that fly reel seat. I cut off the bottom 3 or 4 guides. I put on spinning guides, and now I go down with a weapon. And I started catching more steelhead than all of the other fishermen that were fishing down there at that time. There wasn't a lot of them in the late '60s and early '70s, but there was 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and I would catch and release 8, 10 fish every night. So got along into about August, and I fished. I remember the first year from May 28th to September 7th, I missed 3 nights of fishing. I mean, every night I'd fish. Saturday, Sunday, holidays, 4th of July, didn't matter. I was fishing every night. Well, pretty soon you get to the point in time I was only fishing a stretch of a river of about 3 miles. And when you fish it that many times and this type of stuff, you fish everything that looks like good water 20, 30, 40, 50 times, and you only get bites in certain areas. Pretty soon you realize there's no fish over there. Even though it looks good, there's no fish over there. I learned in those first couple 3 summers that these fish laid exactly the same place every time they come up the river. If you take a fish out of there and you wait for 3 or 4 or 5 hours or until the next morning, there'll be another fish laying exactly where that fish was laying, because it has the right cover, it has the right speed, it has the right protection, it has everything that that fish needs, and another one will move right in there. So during July and August, I mean, I was just going down and fishing all of the good spots, and then turn around, coming right back up and fishing the same spots over and going home. One night, I'm down to 4-pound tests now, and it's in August, and I'm going down the river, and in a hole that there's always 2 fish in, there's 5 guys fishing that hole. So there was a guy standing, the 5th guy was standing up on bank, and he kind of looked like he was the main guy. So I sat there and started talking to him, and pretty soon I asked him, one of the guys quit. I said, "Is it okay if I make a couple casts?" He says, "Yeah, go ahead." So the guy was right exactly where one of the fish always laid, and I turned around, first cast, hooked the fish. Another thing that I was finding is that by the time you hooked the fish, got him into shallow water, because we never used nets, it took the same time from shallow water to get him up onto the beach. So I learned after quite a while that if I would take that fish and just pull him right straight across my boot, I could take that fish and throw him up on the bank 20 feet in the air, and he'd land. I'd snap him off on 4-pound test because I didn't want to use that hook up again. And then I'd turn around, tie another hook up on, went down to where the second fish was, hooked him, did the same thing, grabbed the 2 fish, and I started down the river. And the guy says, "Hold it, hold it, hold it." He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I was going home." He said, "No, that's not what I meant." He says, "We usually take off when we're going to come fishing down here, we take off a half hour early to get down here before you do. And we thrash this couple of these holes up and down right here where we're standing. And every night you come down, you make 2 or 3 casts, catch your 2 fish, and down the river you go every day. So what are you doing different?" Well, seeing as he was nice enough to let me catch my 2 fish that night, I said, "Well, look at your rods. They're too short, they're too heavy, you got too heavy a line, your hooks are too big, your baits are too big, your lead's too big. Other than that, you're doing fine." And he says, "Where'd you get that rod?" And I said, "Well, I made it." He says, "Make me one." Oh, I says, I don't make rods. This is the only rod I ever made. I just fish." He says, "No, make me one." I said, "Listen, I just don't make rods. I'm a machinist. I work and then I go fishing." And he says, "How much you got into that rod?" And I said, "Well, I think I paid in them days, I think I paid about $35 for that fly rod. And I probably got 6 or 8 hours into it, changing it over to what I'm using it for. He says, "I'll give you $100 for it." And I thought, well, I was a German machinist. I made 92.20 take home a week. And I said, no, I says, because I knew there was more fish down the river that needed to be caught. And I says, I don't sell my wife, I don't sell my kids, I don't sell my dog, I don't sell I'm sure not going to sell you my fishing rod. And he says, I'll give you $150 for it. I says, no, no, no. He says, I'll give you $200 for it. I says, let me take my reel off of it. So I took my reel off it. He gave me, this is 1965, he gave me two $100 bills. Now, to tell you the truth, in 1965, I didn't even know they made $100 bills. I staggered up to my car. I got in my car, went down to the store, I bought another rod, I took it home. Now, that was not one of the nights I missed, because I got my 2 fish that night. So I only missed 3 nights that year of fishing in those months. So I went down, bought me a new one, went down, I used my wife's clear fingernail polish, rewrapped the guides, glued up the handle with 5-minute glue, and I'm there the next night. Well, I always used to park in this one area. And there was a guy parked there leaning against his car. So I got out and got my stuff, and the guy says, hold it, hold it. He says, you the guy that's selling rods? I said, no, not me. No, not me. He says, do you know Al Hellenberg? I said, yes, I know Al Hellenberg. He said, you're selling rods for $200 a piece. I said, let me get my reel off of it. So I sold him my second rod and went to the store and bought two more, and then went home and told my wife. That was the day one of the 3 days I missed. I went home and taught my wife how to do it. So I would be out on the river fishing, and she was home making rods, and she was making more money doing rods in those days than I was as a journeyman machinist. But that's how I got into the rod business, and that was clear back in 1965.
1965. So that was when steelhead were first pushing into Kalama.
That's it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Before that, there was no plan. And let me tell you why. If you check, you'll find out that's when they put in the which is the dam that flooded Slilo Falls.
Oh, the Dalles.
Dow.
Okay.
And what happened is the apron on that one was different than most aprons. And what was happening, it was creating the nitrogen, and there was fish dying below the dam. Now, they've never had a dam that the fish died below the dams from the nitrogen. So they was afraid they was going to lose a lot of those upriver fish. So they took eggs from the fish that went clear up, the summer runs that went clear up, and put them into the rivers below Bonneville just to stave that gene pool. So that's why they put them in the Kalama. The Kalama was the first one, then the Washougal. It wasn't until 1972 they put them in the North Fork of the Lewis River. But
did you ever fish that fall before they flooded it?
No.
No.
I was there.
So you got to see it.
I got to see it.
That's amazing.
See it. No, I got to see it. I got to see it. It reminded me. I seen Victoria Falls in Africa, and they said it was the how they found the Victoria Falls is from all of the water vapor coming up. The river that was on fire is what they thought it was. They thought it was smoke, and in those falls there was so much of that you could, before you ever got to the falls, you could see water particles and vapor up over the top of it. I remember that.
Well, Gary, thanks for telling that story. That's one of my favorites, and I'll come in here next week and bug you for another one. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Thank you.